Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show with Sean on boxing. So, of course, the big news recently has been regarding the monster Inoue. And obviously, his fight with Sam Goodman was canceled because, for some reason, Sam Goodman and his team are fucking morons. And they feel that they need to spar, especially tough sparring, with obviously shitty fucking headgear that allowed him to get cut before the fight coming up. So I don't understand what team he has around him, but obviously they dropped the ball in a big way. I would not have been angry if Inui would have just walked away from that fight and then cost Sam Goodman, I think what they were saying, $3 million to get paid for that fight. But Inui obviously has scheduled that fight for late January, which is good. It's also good for True School Sports. Of course, that means he's still in Japan at that time, apparently, so he can still potentially watch that fight. So that's good. That's the one thing about fights and sports being canceled. It's really a pain in the ass for people that actually travel abroad to go watch these fights. But that fight's being rescheduled. Goodman, who is a unification or two sanction body unified champion, not unified, sorry, mandatory. So he's being mandated by two of the sanctioning bodies, which means that obviously the two other sanctioning bodies have two other mandatories, one of whom is MJ Akhmedov, who just fought this weekend as well, scored a sensational knockout. For him, the biggest problem he has is inactivity. The guy's really been far too inactive throughout his career. This was a guy who people really wanted to see unify with Stephen Fulton back there a few years ago. And for some reason, with injuries and just not interested in actually taking that fight was never able to get done. And most people blamed MJ Akhmedov for that situation. And based on the fact that Fulton came all the way to Japan to fight Inui, you probably have to say that that blame is rightly directed. Now, all of a sudden, MJ and his team are capping like crazy that apparently they've been in line for this fight for 2 years. 2 years? What are you talking about? Didn't you just get beat by Tapalas 2 years ago? I mean, are you mandated based on losing right off the bat? I can't imagine how that happened, but okay, whatever. This is not me hating on MJ because I've always said that I really hope that before Inui moves up to 126 pounds, that he does take care of MJ as one of his potential opponents. Obviously, we have a good idea about really what his schedule is going to be for 2025, but there is some openings or possibilities where potentially a fight with MJ could be made. Obviously, we know early January the Goodman fight is going to be happening, and that means two of the sanctioned bodies mandatory is going to be covered. So Inui is not going to have to worry about two of those sanctioned bodies, at least for the next year or potentially two. There's been talk about Inui fighting in the United States in Vegas in the summer, which would be his second date. And one of the opponents that was put out was a potential fight with David Picasso. Obviously, the connection there is because Top Rank promotes with that Mexican promoter. Sorry, I always forget their names. The same promoter that promotes Jaime Mungui as well. So they have an open connection to that promoter. They've obviously worked with him a lot. They co-promote a lot of fighters and a lot of fights. So a fight between Inui and Picasso would be an easy fight. It's also a fight that makes sense in the southern United States, where if you're trying to sell a fight, one of the big crowds you're trying to pull in obviously is the Mexican American fan base. So by having Inui face Picasso, a Mexican American, that obviously is going to make the fight that much more interesting for that particular fan base. Obviously, they're intrigued to see Inui, especially see him live. Um, and obviously, a lot of people will tune in because now they don't have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to watch a Inui fight. It's going to be a normal scheduled time. Um, so you can understand why Picasso is a guy that's being pushed as a potential opponent. Not that that's confirmed, not that that's specifically the fight that is going to happen, but Picasso is also, if he's not the mandatory for the WBC, he's pretty damn close to being the mandatory for the WBC. So, in all senses, that potentially could be another mandatory opponent that Inoue takes care of in 2025, leaving only one more available, which obviously would be MJ Akhmedov. The one problem or hurdle with that fight happening later on in 2025 is the fact that Bob Arum talked about the reason they wanted to do a fight in the States was to do a double header with Inoue and Junto Nakatani, a Japanese fighter who obviously is highly rated. Many people have him on their pound for pound top 10 list. Currently, he's a three-weight world champion and seen as the best and baddest fighter currently at 118 pounds, one weight class below Inoue. And he's obviously called out Inoue. There was speculation about him fighting Inoue's brother, but unfortunately, Inoue's brother lost defending his title, so that fight fell off the table. So we have to see what Junto is going to do next, but they were talking about doing a double header in Vegas to sort of help build up that fight and just get people that much more interested in the potential fight between these two Japanese pound for pound fighters. And it would be great. Obviously, that's a fight I hope happens. I know that in Japan, that would be the biggest fight in Japanese boxing history. It would be huge, humongous, gigantic. You know, that's the kind of fight that I will go from Taiwan to Japan to see live if I can manage to find tickets somehow or some way. But I would be super stoked for that potential fight. And in truth, that's a real 50-50 fight. I really like Junto Nakatani. I think a lot of things he brings to the ring are very problematic for Inoue. Just his length, his southpaw stance, his power, his straight punches, his ability to control distance very well. These are all things that potentially could really give Inoue some problems. Obviously, I feel Inoue's got the faster feet, the faster hands. As far as power, at this point, I'm not sure. Nakatani is naturally a bigger fighter, so he's going to be able to put on weight really comfortably to get to 122. And potentially that might be his best weight, right? Whereas we know Inoue, probably his best weight was 118. But for Junto, his best weight might be 122, might even be 126 somewhere down the road. So if that fight does happen, that would potentially be the three fights for Inoue in 2025. Obviously, the unification fight with Sam Goodman, the unification fight with David Picasso, and the huge title defense against Junto Nakatani. So where does that leave MJ? Potentially, MJ might be the opponent they could do in the summer, right? That would obviously be a good opponent. The question is, with the American boxing public, does it matter if Inoue fights MJ or David Picasso? Does it really matter as far as what the American population is going to be concerned with? If you're having him fight some unknown Uzbekistanian fighter, is that going to really sell in the US? Is that going to get boxing fans really excited about the matchup? Are people going to go watch it and tune in to watch Inoue versus MJ, some guy that they're barely even can pronounce his name and barely know who he is? Not to say that Picasso's a household name, because no, he's not. But as I mentioned, he is a Mexican fighter. So just based on that alone, you can understand that Mexican fans would be far more interested in that fight. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Obviously, we are all hardcore boxing fans, so probably the majority of us would prefer an MJ fight just because it's a far more significant fight and a much better name on Inoue's resume. And for me, I have no problem in that fight. I think it'd be great to add MJ's name to his resume. Obviously, Inoue haters are consistently trying to find ways to downplay and discredit him. So even if he beats MJ, they're going to find ways to say, well, MJ's not that good. He already lost to Marlon Palace. What did he do? Blah, 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 blah. So, you know how the haters are. Literally, there's nothing you can do that's really going to make them happy. If you fight Picasso, he's a nobody. If you fight MJ, he's a nobody. So, they actually literally want Inoue to jump up to 135 to take on Tank Davis, because at that point, maybe Tank Davis could knock him out and then prove that Inoue is nothing but a hype job. But, we're here talking about real boxing, not the narratives and the bullshit that consistently is pushed. So that's really the one opening right there. Obviously, that summertime fight, the possibility of Inoue fighting 4 times this year, with MJ being a potential opponent. I don't know the likelihood of that. What could potentially happen though is that the Junto Nakatani fight could be pushed back, um, especially if they want to have Junto fight some of the other bantamweight champions to unify titles. Obviously, he's younger than Nui, and so they might think that it's better to sort of let him build up a little bit more in his career and do some more significant things by getting some more significant names on his resume. Not just to build the fight for boxing fans like us, but also for the Japanese market, to really sort of put more air in the tires of that fight between Inoue and Junto Nakatani. Obviously, they know who he is and they're excited about him. I'm sure they're big fans. But Inoue's been around a longer time, far longer period of time, has built up a lot more credit and name recognition than Junto, who really has sort of come out of nowhere the last 2 years. So if he was to unify a few of the titles against the other champions at bantamweight, that would only build up the excitement that much more. And potentially what we could get is maybe, as I was speculating in videos previously, MJ versus Inoue fight in Saudi Arabia. We know that Saudi Arabia and Inoue just signed a contract together, and it wasn't specifically for fight dates, but obviously fight dates are still a possibility if they can afford to pay him the kind of money where he sees, okay, so I can fight MJ in Saudi Arabia, fight Picasso in the US, fight obviously Goodman in Japan, and then in 2026, early on, then I could fight obviously Junto in Japan, and at that point, I could then move up to 126, right? Because I mean, that would be another 4 title defenses of his 122 super bantamweight title. At that point, he'd be 31 years old, 32, I guess 32 years old. So, it's still prime time to move up. Obviously, it gives him a little bit more time to naturally develop into a 126-pound fighter. Obviously, you're getting some good style matchups as well. Goodman is going to be a far different fighter than Picasso. Picasso is going to be much different than MJ, and obviously MJ is going to be very different than Junto Nakatani. One is very short and quick and diminutive. The other one is very tall and lanky and long. But let me know what you think. What would you prefer? And are there any other potential names available that you think make interest? I know some people were talking about Elijah Pierce, but at this point, what has Elijah Pierce done to really put him in as a significant potential opponent for Inoue? I mean, even in America, he's an unknown fighter. So, outside of America, he's literally an unknown fighter. So it's not really a fight that makes that much sense. Not unless he was to beat, say, David Picasso or beat MJ Akhmedov. And then obviously victories of that nature would elevate him quite a bit and put him in as a possible name opponent for Inoue. But I'm excited. I'm a little disappointed, obviously, that the Sam Goodman fight fell through. I was looking forward to seeing Inoue get back in the ring. His last performance, obviously, against TJ Dahoney was a little bit underwhelming. His performance wasn't that great. And then the way the fight stopped was a little disappointing. It looked like Dahoney sort of took the easy way out. Now we know Dahoney is scheduled to fight Nick Ball. That'll be intriguing because obviously one fight people have been pushing for is Inoue versus Nick Ball to become a 5-weight world champion at 126 pounds. And obviously Nick Ball is the smallest of the champions. So it's a fight that makes more sense for a guy moving up in weight. And I always felt Inoue would beat Nick Ball. He's just a far better all-around fighter than Nick Ball is. No matter how much pressure Nick Ball is bringing, I don't think he's going to be able to win a fight based on pressure and volume against the monster. but we will see what he does against TJ Dahoney. That's a good fight to see exactly how dominant he is against a fighter that obviously we saw Inoue in with recently. Um, Also, to be fair, David Picasso also beat TJ Dahoney not that long ago as well. So that's even another possible fight, just to sort of get a good perspective of a common opponent that all three of these guys have been in the ring with. But let me know what you prefer. What would you like to see the monster do in 2025? I mean, I've always been excited about the possibility of sort of doing a world tour. I mean, I know he's done it already, but at this point where he's really got a lot of name leverage behind him, obviously the Japanese market is solidified. There's nothing you need to do to build up your fights there. But globally, to continue to build yourself up, if he was to fight in the States and then fight in Saudi Arabia this year, I think that would be great. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Peace out.